You know, the most striking truth about the insecurity farmer is that they don't attack your self-esteem, they curate it. We tend to assume that a manipulator will try to make you feel bad, right? But in these really high-pressure dynamics, your own drive for self-improvement, for growth, gets used against you. It turns these tiny little seeds of uncertainty into a psychological fence that keeps you completely dependent on the controller's guidance. So why is it that the person who claims to be your most honest friend is the one who ends up making you feel fundamentally broken behind closed doors? Well, that's the core paradox of what's called observation-based priming. It's that exact moment your desire to be better is turned into the mechanism of your own psychological containment.
Let's really focus on that word curate. It's so specific. This isn't a bulldozer knocking you down. It's more like a gardener. It's not someone overtly insulting you. Instead, it's this careful, strategic process of managing how you see yourself. They plant specific little doubts, they water them with concern, and they prune away your confidence until the only reflection you trust is the one they're holding up for you. It's just a much more subtle and, honestly, way more insidious form of control because it's disguised as help. And that really brings us to this central, super confusing question. I mean, how can your biggest advocate also be the source of your deepest insecurities? This is where that observation-based priming comes into play. It's a technique where the farmer hones in on your genuine desire to grow, to improve, and then they hijack it. They train you to observe yourself, but only through their lens, making their honest feedback the only thing that matters. So it's not about building you up, it's about creating a dependency that keeps you right where they want you.
All right, so to really get our heads around this, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to define what it means to be a curator of self-esteem. Then, we'll look at the foundation of control they build. After that, we'll break down their three-step harvesting process, dig into the psychology for both people involved, talk about how to start reclaiming your own mental territory, and we'll wrap up with the one takeaway you absolutely need to remember.
So let's dive into this first concept, and it's really important to say this up front. This explainer is all about observable patterns of interaction, okay? We're not diagnosing anyone here. We're just exploring how a specific behavior, what the source material calls strategic doubt cultivation, can so easily be misinterpreted by our brains as just profound relational honesty. It's a system that really preys on our desire to be better people.
Now, some of you might be thinking, this just sounds like negging, those backhanded compliments. But this is way more sophisticated. Negging is a tactic, a one-off comment. Insecurity farming, that's a whole strategy. It's not about random remarks. It's about creating an entire ecosystem where your confidence level is precisely adjusted to maximize the controller's influence over you. Your self-worth literally becomes a dial they can turn up or down whenever it suits them.
For a dynamic like this to even take root, the farmer has to build the right environment. They need to lay a foundation of control, and it's often so subtle you don't even see it happening. This isn't just about criticism. It's about creating a state of managed scarcity, a scarcity of approval, of certainty, of validation, so that their opinion becomes the only currency that actually matters to you.
And this is called social value throttling. A great way to think about it is like a governor on an engine. It just keeps you from reaching your full potential. You're always almost ready for that promotion, almost ready for that healthy relationship, almost ready to be independent. The farmer constantly uses the language of concern to highlight your supposed fragility. You see it in high-stakes mentorships or in partners who are always worried about your social anxiety. The real goal is to make their approval the finish line you just never quite cross.
So this whole environment is built on two core beliefs that get installed in the target's mind. First, you've got the improvement hook. You genuinely start to believe their constant criticism is a gift, that they're the only one brave enough to tell you the truth. Second is relational precarity. This is a feeling of constant instability. You feel like you're always walking on thin ice, which makes you hyper-focused on performing, on proving you're getting better, just to keep the relationship afloat.
And this right here illustrates the huge shift that happens. You go from active growth, where you're in the driver's seat of your own life, to passive compliance. You stop chasing your own goals. Instead, your main goal becomes managing the controller's anxiety. You might have a totally legitimate complaint about them, but you'll just drop it to stop their big performance of worrying about you. Your energy isn't yours anymore, it's all being used to serve their emotional state.
The long-term cost of this is massive. It's called identity erosion. Over time, you don't just lose confidence, you lose the actual habit of trusting yourself. Your own intuition, your own judgment, it all gets drowned out. You start to genuinely believe that you lack self-awareness and that this person is your necessary guide. And that erosion is the exact opposite of what we're aiming for here.
which is something we can call self-referential sovereignty.
Okay, so how do they actually pull this off? Well, it's not random. The source material lays out a very clear, systematic, three-step playbook. It's a cycle that's designed to plant, cultivate, and then harvest your insecurity for their benefit. Let's break down how this cycle really works. So the whole process kicks off with the observation phase. The farmer notices some tiny, plausibly true flaw in you. Then they move to concern cultivation, where they express all this worry about it. This is what exploits our natural tendency to observe and adapt to social cues. The farmer just becomes the only cue that matters. So you start working really hard to fix this thing they're so worried about, which sets you up perfectly for the final step, the harvest.
And the harvest. This is the crucial moment. This is when they have maximum leverage. Just when you're about to succeed, or get that new job, or maybe even leave the relationship, the farmer strikes. They'll say something like, "I'm just worried you're not ready for this. Remember how you struggle with X?" They remind you of that flaw they've been cultivating all this time. And because you're scared they might be right, you pause, you stay. And here's the brilliant, awful trap. They then use your decision to stay as proof that you were unstable all along. It just locks you deeper into the cycle.
This whole cycle completely rewires how you think. It flips reality upside down. Look at this comparison. The framer frames your chronic, manufactured self-doubt as a good thing, as self-awareness. But at the same time, any little flicker of your own self-trust or confidence gets framed as a bad thing, as arrogance. So your brain literally gets conditioned to seek their approval by showing how much you doubt yourself, and to fear your own intuition as if it's some kind of character flaw.
So why on earth does this happen? What motivates someone to act like this, and what makes someone else vulnerable to it? Well, it's not just about a bad person and a victim, it's about a psychological dynamic where two different sets of needs lock together in a really, really unhealthy way. The farmer's motivation is often about what's called total retention. By owning your sense of value, they get absolute leverage. Sometimes there's also something called projective invalidation at play, where they're offloading their own insecurities onto you. On the other side, the vulnerability often comes from a really good place, a strong need for self-improvement. The danger is when you start to value being a better version of yourself more than you value being a separate person.
And this dynamic is so effective because it exploits a fundamental piece of our human wiring, social comparison theory. Biologically, we are hardwired to look to other people to understand ourselves. We can't help but see ourselves in the mirrors our closest relationships hold up to us. And the insecurity farmer knows this. They work to become your only mirror, making sure that the only reflection you ever see is the distorted one they control.
Okay, so we've taken the problem apart. Now let's talk about the solution. How do you start to reclaim your own psychological territory and build that self-referential sovereignty we mentioned? The key here isn't a big confrontation, it's awareness. It's about you gathering your own data to strengthen your own self-trust.
Here are two really practical steps you can take. First, do a validation audit. Just look back at all their helpful advice. Did it ever actually lead to you feeling more peaceful or more confident? Or did it just lead to more anxiety and a need for even more of their advice? Second, develop external mirror awareness. Intentionally find new friends, new hobbies, new groups. See how other people react to you. When you start to realize that nobody else sees these fatal flaws the farmer is so worried about, their spell starts to break.
And this is such a massive shift in perspective. The goal here is to recognize that the anxiety and doubt you're feeling, it might not be a sign that you're broken. It may, in fact, be a perfectly healthy, totally sane biological response to being systematically manipulated. Your gut is screaming that something is wrong. The first step is just to start listening to it, instead of listening to the person who's telling you your gut can't be trusted.
Ultimately, reclaiming your territory boils down to this single powerful principle. This is the absolute core of self-referential sovereignty. Yeah, you can listen to feedback, you can be open to growth, but at the end of the day, you are the final authority on who you are. No one else gets to hold the pen that writes your definition of yourself.
So, after all of this, what's the single most important lesson to take away from understanding this whole dynamic of the insecurity farmer? I think it's about redefining our understanding of what help and honesty are supposed to look like in a healthy relationship.
And it's this. The most dangerous cages are not built with steel bars and locks. They're the ones constructed with words like honesty and concern, and I'm just trying to help you. It's the manipulation that dresses itself up as love that is always the hardest to see, and often the hardest to escape.
And that's the bottom line.
This is the simple truth you can hold on to. Genuine love, real support, true friendship, they expand your world. They don't shrink it. Someone who truly cares about you wants to see you become more capable, more confident, more yourself. They don't try to make you smaller just so they can feel safer or bigger or more in control. Your mind is your territory, and awareness is the first and most powerful step in making sure you are the one who governs it.